Today we're going to be talking about dad's experiences of fatherhood during 2025. Specifically, today we'll be looking at dads at home, dads at work, and dad's well-being, and we'll be shining a spotlight on a particular group of dads at the end of the event, dads who don't necessarily fit into that sort of normal nuclear family. So we'll be looking at those specifically. Right. So just a few thank yous before I get going. Firstly, a huge thank you to the 440 dads who participated in this year's survey. Wanted to thank the Scottish Government, their parenting play and baby box team funded the dad survey this year, and a huge thank you to that team, not only for funding us, but also helping with the design of the dad survey. Also thanks to Dr. Lisa Gold and Dr. Sarah Foley, both working at the University of Edinburgh, for their insights, and also the help with the design of the survey. To Smart Play Network, to Share Parenting Scotland, Flexibility Works, the UNCRC team at Scottish Government, Parenting Across Scotland, and Dad's Rock, who all played a big part in shaping this year's Dad survey. I want to say a special thanks to the dads of Dad's Rock, who tested our survey before it went live. So a special thanks to them. And I just wanted to say that this report is in memory of Callum McNabb, and a huge thank you to Amy Rush for her support. Also, I just wanted to thank our expert panel today. So we're really lucky to have Professor Anna Tarrant with us and Susie Haywood. So we're Susie and I were talking just before the event today, and she's both she and Anna have been involved with Dad's Fathers Network Scotland for a number of years and have participated in these events previously. Also, Kevin Kane, who is the new Chief Executive of Share Parenting Scotland. And finally, Lynn, who I have worked with or been working with for probably the last 2 or 3 years, I would think, and came along to the Dad Strike up in Scotland earlier on in the year. So thank you all for taking time out your busy schedules to come along and provide some feedback and some responses to the Dad survey today. So just a little bit of context. This is the 7th Dad's survey in this particular series. We started back in 2020 during the first lockdown, and have subsequently done another 6 surveys. This is the last one, and we gathered the data back in June 2025. All in all, over this time, we have captured the experiences of nearly 3,000 dads from right across Scotland, and we've been privileged really to get a glimpse into their lives, some of the tragedies that have befallen them, some of their triumphs, their struggles, their moments of joy, have all been set out in their responses to our Dad surveys questions. And this series sort of provides us with an insight into Dad's journeys over what's been a particularly trying time, actually. And just in the last year, so we've gone through enormous changes culturally, but in the last years, even since June 2020, our First Minister talked about a long, dark economic winter. And the Understanding Scotland report, which is a quarterly report that comes out in Scotland every year, and it looks at responses from around 2,000 adults living in Scotland. And that talked about the economic sentiment has deteriorated even further since 2024. And as you can see from this quote from the Understanding Scotland report, many people now believe both the general economy and their financial situation have worsened compared to a year ago, and expectations for the year ahead remain bleak. And a number of groups within that report were shown to be struggling, particularly households with children, particularly are consistently more likely to report serious impacts from deteriorating mental health, physical health, food insecurity, and strained relationships. So it's really important that we look at whole families and how we can better support them. So it's not all bad news, I would say. I was talking to Anna before we started today, and I can't remember a time actually when dads and fatherhood has been in the news more often than it has this year so far. We've had the dad strike back at the beginning of the summer. We had the success of adolescence with a father, one of the two main protagonists, a father and son relationship. Recently, Joe Swash has been talking about young dads. The Dad Shift guys have recently done another campaign called UK Paternity Leave as a Mother, whatever. And most recently, John Lewis has turned its attention to fatherhood and the relationship between a dad and his son. So I'm now just going to go on to talk a little bit about our dad survey, a little bit about the design and some of the demographic information. So who is taking part? So just to say that obviously our dad survey is taken in context. So 1 year uh, follows on from the next, and given the context that we were in, given this long, dark economic winter that we found ourselves in, we want to find out really, are dads still able to share their parenting responsibilities more equally? So in the previous years, we've seen that the number of hours that dads have been spending with their children has gone up year on year. We want to know whether that was still the case. We certainly last year in 2024, we saw dads really struggling to manage their work-life balance. And last year we saw a real high watermark of dads who were telling us that their mental health was very, very poor. In addition, we also wanted to find out about paternity leave, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So between the 1st and 30th of June this year, we put out a call to dads across the country, and we had 440 dads respond. So like previous years, it's quite a short survey, takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It's a cross-sectional survey, which means that every year, and it's really important to take this into account, but every year there's a new sample. So it's not the same dads that we're approaching every year, although the demographics of the dads from each year tend to be very similar. And there's more information on that in the actual report. So we talk a little bit about we find out a little bit about dads, their socio-demographic questions like age, marital status, education, and so forth. A bit about their family structure, so the number of children they have, their ages, their living situations. Then we ask them a series of questions about home and work. So the amount of childcare that they do, housework, their work-life balance, information this year specifically about flexibility. We ask them about mental health and their well-being, about the relationships with their child and their co-parent. And then we have a series of wildcard questions, and they're different every year. I've already said that this year we asked specifically about paternity leave because it's been very much in the news this year. And we also asked a series of questions about dad's transition into fatherhood. We're not touching on that today. That will come out later on in 2026, believe it or not. So it'll be the beginning of next year that we bring out that report. So in terms of age, as you can see, most dads, 65% of dads were aged between 25 and 64. We had a good spread of dads from across Scotland. In fact, the only local authority area that we didn't have dads participating in was from the west of Scotland, so the islands in the west of Scotland. There were dads represented in every other local authority area. We had more dads in the Lothians than the general population. So there's probably a slight overrepresentation for dads in the Lothian area, slightly fewer in Ayrshire and Arran, Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and Lanarkshire, I think. So a slight difference in that area. In terms of education, as you can see, is quite a highly educated cohort. So as you can see, well over 3/4 of dads were college or university educated or had a postgraduate degree. And I would say that that uh, is certainly has to be taken into account when we look at the data from this particular survey. When we look at where dads are living and we apply the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, or SIMD data, which essentially segments postcode areas to levels of deprivation. So SIMD 1 is the most deprived areas in Scotland, and SIMD 5 are the least deprived areas of Scotland. You can see that we have dads from all of those areas with a slight bias towards SIMD 4 and SIMD 5, which are dads from more affluent areas. Again, probably in line with the general population. Around about 86% of the dads who participated had either one or two children. And there's a slight bias towards dads with children in the early years. So over half of the dads had a child under 5. And as you can see, almost 1 in 5 dads had a child under 1. So as we've done in years before, we asked dads about their marital status, and as you can see, 64% were either married or registered in a civil partnership. An additional 16% were cohabiting. When we asked dads a number of different questions relating to their living arrangements this year to give us a better idea of the sort of wide variety of living situations or living arrangements that dads can find themselves in. So we asked this year for the first time, do you live with your children's other parent? And as you can see, 78% lived with their children's other parent. The remainder either said no or told us other. And those who told us other could provide us with further information that makes more sense of their situation. We then asked all of the dads if they had children who don't always live with them. So as you can see, 79% said no, but 21% said yes, they did have children that didn't always live with them. We asked those particular dads, that 21%, a further question, which is in the past month, how often did your child spend nights together with you? As you can see, over 50%, 51% of dads had a child that stayed with them at least once a week. So 14% said that they had a child that was staying with them 4 to 5 times a week. A further 34% were spending 2 to 3 times a week, and 3% was just once a week. The remainder, 11% had their child a few times a month, and a smaller number had a child once a month. 34% told us that they had children who didn't stay with them at all overnight. And that group, we asked another question. So that group who had kind of no overnight access to their children, we asked, have you had any of the following contact with your children within that past month? So 26% said that they had face-to-face contact, 18% talked about digital contact, and just over half said that they had no contact at all during that time. So out of all of the 440 dads who responded, 21 of those dads had no contact. So getting on to our key findings, the first of our key findings was quite disappointing and quite surprising, actually, I have to say. For me, we found that dads are spending less time engaged in childcare and household chores, suggesting that there's a slide towards traditional gender stereotypes. So you can see this is a graph showing 2022, 2023, and 2024 uh, uh, information or responses to the question, how many hours per week do you spend playing with your children or supporting their learning? As you can see, there's quite a similarity between the graph shapes in those years. Last year, we had 40% of all the dads who provided us with an answer telling us that they spent more than 25 hours per week playing with their children or supporting their learning. And as you can see, this year, that's dropped significantly to 17% of all the dads who are asked that question, which is a really significant drop. Sadly, we can see that this is mirrored in the number of hours that dads are spending on household chores. So as you can see, there was a slight increase actually last year in 2024 in the number of dads who were spending 10 hours or more on household chores compared to the previous years. This year, sadly, that's dropped down to 13%. So we can see that dads seem to be spending less time at home, both looking after their children and doing household chores. One thing that stayed fairly similar this year is the number of times that dads cook a meal for their children. So as you can see, that's fairly similar this year at 37% compared to the previous 3 years. When we look uh, at the number of hours that dads are spending time playing with their children or supporting their learning, and then look at that through the lens of Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, what we can see is that dads from SIMD1 continue to do the most, actually, of all of the groups of dads. So as you can see, there's 20% of dads who are doing more than 25 hours a week playing with their children or supporting their learning, compared to 16% of dads from SIMD5. So that is the dads from the most affluent areas in Scotland, which is really good news. I think the bad news is that we can see what a big drop there is between 2024 and 2025 in this particular group. So we can see on the chart on the right-hand side, this is last year's figures, that 49% of dads from SIMD1 were telling us that they're spending 25 hours or more on that activity. So that's dropped by 29% this year, which is disheartening, I would say. So our second key finding is that the vast majority of the dads who we asked this year felt that they had insufficient paternity leave after the birth of their youngest child. Now, if you've been following the news at all in the last probably 6 months, maybe 12 months, you'll see that there's been a lot of discussion about this. And as I said, we really wanted to find out about Scottish dads, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about balancing work and family life. So again, we ask these questions every year of our dads. So we ask them, balancing work and family life. How is balancing work and family life for you? And they can answer very difficult, difficult, usually okay, is good, or very good. And as you can see, so the dads who have told us this year that balancing family life is very difficult or difficult is slightly improved from 2024. So in 2024, 12% of dads told us that their balancing work life was very difficult. That compares to 8% this year. So it looks like there's a slight improvement on it from last year, 2024 to 2025. However, if we compare 2023 and 2022's results, we can see that although things have improved from 2024, it's still pretty bad. We also ask every year, sorry, one second, if dads have flexibility on where they work. And as you can see, the last few years, 2022, 2023, 2024, it's been fairly standard. So around about 70% of dads have told us that they have some flexibility on where they work. This year, that number has gone down to 61%. And we did quite a lot of a little bit more in-depth analysis on dads and their access to flexibility or flexible working. And we asked dads, first of all, whether they were office-based or whether they were frontline workers. So we could kind of assess whether dads' attitudes to flexible working were different for different kind of cohorts of dads. And what we found were that dads who already had some flexibility at work, who were both office-based and frontline workers, were most happy with their level of flexibility. So you can see dads who were office-based who had flexibility, 91% of those dads were happy. 94% of dads who had flexibility but they were frontline workers were happy. However, for dads who had no flexibility, office-based staff, 70% of those were happy, but the dads who had no flexibility and were frontline workers were the least happy. So just 59% of those dads told us they were happy with their current level of flexibility. I'm not going to talk much about this because we don't have a huge amount of time today, but just these are some of the challenges that dads told us about when accessing flex. By far and away, the most frequent response to accessing, or the most frequent problem dads had accessing flexibility, was unsupportive workplace culture. And this dad talked about the return to office. So a return to office being enforced with no reasoning, just told that they didn't like it, and that was working from home. 21% of dads talked about job constraints making flexibility difficult. So one dad saying, I work shift and there isn't a lot of flexibility within the pattern. My weekends are often, my weekends off aren't every weekend. So he's just not getting that time to spend with his children. And 14% talked about a lack of flexible working policy available. So I have no flexibility at all, no option to work from home or work with flexible time. There were less dads talking about these kind of traditional masculine stereotypes that might prevent them from accessing flex, but tellingly, actually, particularly male-dominated industries seem to be an issue. So this one dad saying, I work in construction industry, which is male-dominated. I would not feel confident asking my employer about any arrangements to better suit my childcare. So getting on to paternity leave, this really did shock me, actually. I didn't expect this. We asked dads to tell us how much paternity leave did they take at the birth of their youngest child. So their youngest child, their most recent child, how much paternity leave did they take off? Now, 75% of dads, really struck me actually. So 3/4 of all of those dads said that they took 2 weeks or less paternity leave. I'm just going to just leave that with you for a second. 75%, 2 weeks or less. And as you can see, 19% of those dads had no paternity leave at all. It's worth saying we were asking specifically about paternity leave, so this doesn't include portions of annual leave that they took off or different types of leave that they might have taken off. This is just purely looking at the paternity leave that they were taking off, but that was really shocking to me. We asked a follow-up question saying, how do you feel you had enough time off on paternity leave to bond with your baby and support your partner? And as you can see, almost 4 out of 5 dads said that they didn't. So 78% of dads said that they hadn't had enough time to bond with their baby and support their partner. Now, if you look at that information and look at it in terms of the amount of time that dads took off or had off on paternity leave, you can see that the group with 1 to 2 weeks were felt the worst, really. So 90% of those dads said that they didn't feel as that they had enough time off to bond with their child and to support their partner. But by the time that there's the dads who have taken 6 weeks or more, that number is reduced to 23%. So the more time off dad has on paternity leave, the happier they are with the amount of time they've had with their baby and their partner. I don't have a huge amount of time to go into the first bar chart of none, but essentially that none bar chart includes unemployed dads, self-employed dads, as well as dads who are in the workplace. So that's slightly skewed that data. But as you can see from some of the quotes that we had from dads, just how precarious that is. So one dad said, we had premature twins. My wife was recovering from a C-section and we had almost no family help. I needed more time, but didn't get any. Another dad said, I would always have liked more time, but needed to work for money. So I'm going to sort of throw this over now to our panel. First of all, I might stop sharing my screen actually, just for a second, and ask Anna to come in first, I think. Anna Tarrant, Professor Anna Tarrant, ask her why we're seeing a downturn in dads spending time at home and what you think might be the potential causes. So Anna, if I can ask you that question.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm in a very loud hotel lobby with very bad Christmas music on, so apologies if that filters through. I just wanted to first of all just say congratulations to Kathy and the team for the survey. To have collected data of this magnitude over 7 years is really incredible and a really important opportunity to provide a temperature check for where we're at in terms of fatherhood, and to see some of the ebbs and flows really in the durability of father involvement. This is something that colleagues and I have been looking at over a decade, particularly through qualitative research. So it's really interesting to see through the quantitative data and some of the qualitative as well, just some of these fluctuations really, which, you know, I think demonstrate just quite how tenuous father involvement is. What's shocking, and I think I agree with you, Kathy, on that, is that, you know, we know through qualitative research, we know through years of evidence that culturally speaking, fathers want to be more involved in their children's lives. They want to be invested in the caregiving. To some extent have been helping out more with the household chores, but perhaps less those some of the other indicators of different kinds of unpaid and paid work. But essentially tell us they want to be there for their children. So the evidence, particularly around play, is really quite shocking and sad, really. The fact that men don't feel they have the time, or certainly perceive they don't have the time to play and do those really important things that help them bond with their children, that result in better outcomes for their children in terms of their cognitive development, educational development, even self-regulation, which have impacts long across the life course, is a real shame. It would be really easy to sort of go, well, men aren't doing the housework, they're lazy. They're not doing it because, you know, they just think it's a woman's job, and, you know, not committed to gender equality, all that kind of stuff. But I think that is to individualize, and it again doesn't reflect the data. And again, we know from broad sets of data historically that we have to look at social systems, we have to look at family policy systems, we have to look at welfare policy systems, and we need to think about the sort of intersection of social, economic, and cultural factors that shape and influence what it is that parents do, and how people arrange their work care balances or imbalances. We know that there are increased work demands, particularly in this kind of context of an economic winter, which is really bedding in now, I think, and that clearly shows in the data. Men are either working longer hours, or they're navigating job insecurity, and, you know, that requires them to be available on employers' behalf, and that has impacts on their family commitments. We know that, again, in a context of economic and financial pressure, that men and couples are more likely to prioritise work over caregiving to make ends meet. So people make very rational economic decisions that, again, impact on the time they have to invest in family identities and practices. I think you mentioned, Cathy, workplace cultures as well. You know, they tend to still stigmatise men as caregivers. There's some really great work by Jasmine Kelland, who talks about the fatherhood forfeit in organisational cultures. So men feel less able to ask for their entitlements to leave. Workplaces don't always know about entitlements to parental leave, and or they get stigmatized for prioritizing their identity as caregivers. So again, all of these things are feeding into and shaping what it is men are able to do in terms of fatherhood. Paternity leave, you know, I'm not surprised by some of the findings. You know, we do have some, I think it's the second least generous parental leave, or certainly paternity leave, in Europe. There are some positive shifts in terms of the fact that the current government is looking at the evidence base. They are trying to review parental leave. But in the last year, despite sort of quite promising suggestions about what they might do differently, potential to shift parental leave to 6 weeks as opposed to 2 weeks, you know, that there's been kind of very little movement on that so far, and it's kind of been more of a process of pragmatic incrementalism, what we've been sort of theorising it as. But we know that if dads are involved and invested in their children's lives really early on, that helps to, you know, cement their identity as a father, helps them to build a bond with children, and we know it's good for gender equality as well. So what we really need, I think, and what this data demonstrates to me, is this fundamental overhaul of the norms, policies, and power structures that are shaping paid and unpaid care. We also need to think about fatherhood intersectionally as well, and I think that your data really demonstrates that we can't separate gender from economic inequality. What we're really seeing, again, is that kind of inequality among fathers within families and across families as well. So we can't address father involvement without addressing poverty and inequality. Again, that requires us to think about systems change, family policies, and welfare state support as well. So those are my four points and takeaways. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And I just wanted to open that up to the rest of the panel if you had any other thoughts about what's causing this sort of downturn in dads spending time with their children, any potential causes.
Yeah, I don't mind coming in, and I agree with what Anna has said about looking at this at a kind of system-wide level rather than individualising it. But I guess I'm kind of coming to it as an individual with my own experience of motherhood and being part of a family and existing in a world that really is quite difficult at the moment. And yeah, I guess I was trying to think, like, what's changed in the last year? What could be driving this quite significant change? And I know what you said about the different sample and all of that, but it does seem quite significant. And there's a few things that came to me, and I think there is a general sense, and I think I'm hearing it in lots of different spheres of my life, whether it's work, personally, just that people are feeling generally overwhelmed and burnt out with with everything that's going on in the world and the country and their lives, just the kind of constant drip feed of negative news, and that actually leads us to kind of wanting an escape from that and a distraction. And I wonder, and I guess here I'm speaking maybe from personal experience, it's very easy when you've got a phone in your hand for that to become the distraction. I know for me, like, I end up spending, as a parent, I know I want to spend more time with my children, but I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm feeling quite, I don't know, I'm looking for an escapism from that. And there's an easy answer to that, and an answer that's really quite addictive. And so I don't know that this is the right answer, but I guess it's just something that I've been reflecting on, this kind of idea of kind of digital distraction. And that has an, we talk about it a lot for young people and children, but actually for us as parents, I think that's a very, very real thing. That is a kind of natural response to a difficult environment for us all. Yeah, that's just something I had been thinking about.
It's interesting you say that, actually, Susie, because we asked a question about, I haven't put it into this report, but we asked a question about dads' attitudes towards their own digital use this year. So that might provide some insights, actually. So thank you for bringing that up, because we might be able to not answer that question, but provide some response, actually, to how dads perceive their own digital use and the impact that has on their relationship with their child. Kevin, did you? Oh,
Yeah.
hand Lynn. We'll go to Kevin first.
Sorry, Lynn, I was busy trying to figure out how to get the emoji hand. Yeah, no, lots of good stuff, and grateful to be here, and thanks for all the work you and the team and everyone's done to bring this survey together, Kathy. In terms of structures, and in answering the question directly, the cost of living crisis has been mentioned. Most dads in our network have said that they feel pressure to work longer hours or take multiple jobs, especially those from SIMD areas. So that aligns with the dad's survey, which, as you mentioned, Kathy, so sadly shows a drop in involvement from last year. In terms of workplace cultures, had the privilege of joining a single parent event last week, and we were able to discuss the gender norms, masculinity norms. That signals that too much involvement at home is optional for dads, expected of mums. This is not new, but we need to keep talking about it. That helps neither mum nor dad. And a third one, which I was musing and have been for the past year, is that in office-based work, has there been, and it's a question I don't know the answer to, a zealous return to work attitude, as though COVID-19 and all the learning from lockdown, remember when we did learning from lockdown sessions? It's as though it didn't happen. Croy railway station is depressingly full. The overspill is full, and now people are being ticketed for parking in adjoining areas. It used to just be a Monday, it used to just be a Tuesday, now it's every day. We have the benefit in my place of remaining hybrid working and seeing presenteeism for the foolish pursuit that it is. So just maybe that could explain some of the trends in that particular area. Clearly, if you're building a house and you're out on the tools, working from home, very rarely going to be an option. There's some policy considerations there as well, which has been picked up. I think it's worth reiterating that the paternity leave forces dad back to work before crucial bonding with their babies established, leaving mum isolated as well. And we can see that only 25% took more than 2 weeks. So many never got this chance to establish those early caregiving habits. From our point of view on relationships, which is related to the question, is that we see dads spending less time with their children, not by choice, but due to unresolved parental conflict and barriers to contact, slow court processes. This has also been reflected in the surveys as well around mental health. It declines when the relationship is inhibited with their child. So we know when dads have reliable, predictable opportunities to parent If that's removed, their involvement drops, and not because they don't want to parent, but because the structure doesn't let them. So what I would like to see is dads as a resource, and all of us communicating on that front foot, because if Scotland wants healthier families, we need to address that root cause. Mental health support matters. We've got Public Health Scotland here today. That's brilliant. The prevention agenda is high up the Scottish Government's agenda. That's great to see. But within that, stable, loving relationships between dads and children, I would see that as an equally powerful and possibly simple intervention as well. And just finally, because the stereotyping has been threaded through some of what's been said, and also in your presentation, Cathy, is that when policy and workplace norms reinforce the idea that mothers are the default parent, families can unconsciously fall back into those traditional roles, which is especially prevalent for us when we see the stress of separation. The retreat to those norms becomes a little bit easier. And unfortunately, that can be miscommunicated in the public domain as dads pulling away, but we see examples of the systems pushing them out, and the language used around dads as a deficit rather than a resource, pushing them out. There's lots of disincentives there that I would be happy to present, or have one of the team present on those embedded policy and cultural disincentives. But the short of it is that we know that in most cases children do better in almost all areas of life, and they have the support of both parents. So with that knowledge, I'm sure that we're equipped as a collective to do something about that.
Just bringing, actually, Lynn, it's probably a good point to bring you into the conversation, actually, because you work a lot with mothers returning to work after a period of looking after their children. So I don't know whether you've got any reflections as well.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. I think the previous panelists have kind of touched on most of what I would have said, but I think what Kevin was saying there is absolutely correct, that equality in the workplace begins with equality at home. And if dads are not able to put in place and set up those routines of caregiving in those early days and weeks, then it becomes quite easy for parents to get entrenched into those traditional gender roles. And I think I would love to say that not everybody in sort of knowledge economy jobs is getting dragged back into the office, but I think reading between the lines of this research, it does seem like a lot of dads are getting called back into the office. And of course, that's kind of reinforcing some of those gender norms around dads being the breadwinners and mums being the ones who stay at home with the caring responsibilities and the lower paid, potentially fewer hours jobs. And so that all sort of becomes a bit self-perpetuating. And there is, I don't know that it's rigorous, but certainly anecdotal evidence that suggests that these back to work initiatives are being driven by men, often dads, but whose life circumstances are very different to their workers, in that they're in very senior roles with high salaries, potentially a lot of help at home, and potentially partners who are not working but don't need to work. And I think that comes back to the cost of living point. In my community of almost 24,000 people, which is very female, I do nonetheless see a lot of people looking for second jobs, second income, top-up income. And so I think, you know, if in a two-parent household, it's obviously going to be easier for one parent to work longer hours in a job that they have than for them to switch jobs in the current economy, which is the labour market at the moment is very, very difficult, or for the other parent to then start working from a standing start, particularly if the other parent's the mother who's had a career break and faces a whole load of issues or biases in relation to that. And so I do think that dads are under a lot of pressure, and something's got to give. And it's really sad that what is giving is the time that they're spending with their children.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I probably agree with you, actually. It's circumstances. I don't think that it's dads not wanting to be there. They just feel as though they have no choice. I suspect that's the case. Thank you very much, panel. I'm just going to get on to the next little bit of the survey, and then we'll come back to you right at the end to get your reflections on the second part. So I'm going to see whether I can share my screen again. Okay. Can you see that okay? Is that all okay, Connor?
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks very much. Okay, I'm just going to power through these. Oops. Oh, for some reason I can't. Hmm. Oh, oh, sorry about that. Oh, tech. Right. Okay, so our third key finding is probably a little bit of good and bad news, actually. Really, the key finding is that poor mental health continues to affect dads, particularly those who are living in deprived areas, and also dads who are separated from their children, either some or all of the time. And probably particularly depressing are that fewer than ever of the dads who are struggling, whose mental health has deteriorated or is deteriorating, are looking for or receiving support. So this is just the general response from all of the dads who were surveyed. So 440 dads all answered this question. How would you rate your mental health right now? So you can see that 5% told us that it was very poor, and an additional 27% said that it wasn't great. Now, if you compare this to last year, so 2024, actually, this is an encouraging sign. So last year, 2024, we had 10% of dads who are saying that their mental health was very poor, and an additional 38% saying that it wasn't great. But actually, if you think of 2024 really as being a high watermark, really for poor mental health, actually this year's data is quite similar to 2023 and 2024. In fact, it's a little bit, if we combine those two figures, it's a little bit higher. So certainly dad's mental health, current mental health is better than last year. But still worse actually than 2022 and 2023. We also asked dads how their mental health has been over the last 6 months. So they can tell us that it's improved slightly, it's unchanged, slightly worse, or much worse. And again, we can see this pattern emerging. So in 2024, the number of dads who told us that their mental health had got much worse was 13%, and an additional 34 said that it was slightly worse. This year, the dads who told us that their mental health had got much worse was 8%, with an additional 32 saying that it was slightly worse. So as you can see, again, it's the same pattern. Fewer dads' mental health is deteriorating this year than last year. But once again, actually, if we compare this year's figures to 2022 and 2023, actually, it's around about the same. Now, last year, we asked dads the reason for the deterioration in their mental health. So the dads who told us that their mental health had got slightly worse or much worse, we asked those dads to qualify, to tell us why that might be the case. Now, we took that qualitative data and we categorized it into different categories. And these were the top 5 reasons, really, the top 5 categories that was causing deterioration in mental health. As you can see, work concerns were right at the top. So in 2025, 38% of dads talked about work issues affecting their mental health. 27% talked about mental health issues or physical health issues that they might have, or a member of the close family, so it might be a child or a partner that they were having. Next up are relationship difficulties, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. Also time, so shortage of time or a struggle to juggle. 21% talked about that in their reasons for mental health deterioration. And finally, it was financial concerns. And this is a bit of a strange one for me. Actually, I was would have thought that that would have been probably the same as last year, or a little bit better. But as you can see, if we compare last year's figures to this year's figures, work has come down a little bit, but it's pretty much the same. So the number of dads who are citing issues with work was 2% lower, but around about the same. Dads talking about physical and mental health issues has gone up, has risen by 7%. Relationship difficulties has come down slightly. Issues around time has gone up, but just fractionally, and financial concerns has come down. Now, it could be said that that is good news, and perhaps it is to a certain extent. But I think probably it shouldn't be cause for an awful lot of celebration. My feeling is that financial concerns and work kind of go hand in glove. They're kind of part of the same package. And certainly 56% of dads in total talked about either issues with work, issues with the struggle to juggle, or financial concerns. So one of those three things, 50%. So over half of dads talked about one of those things. And these are just some of the quotes from dads. So for example, this one dad said, I worry about my long-term job security. I have a second child on the way, and I'm worried about being able to provide for them. And I'm worried about not spending enough time with my family to be an effective dad. When we look at mental health issues through the lens of SIMD data, perhaps unsurprisingly, you can see that dads from SIMD1, so those are from the most disadvantaged areas, have the highest level of mental health issues, and 9% saying that their mental health is very poor, further 33% saying that it was not great, compared to SIMD 5, where 4% said that it was very poor, and 22% said that it wasn't great. If we look at, again, the data through the lens of SIMD, and this is deterioration in mental health. So has their mental health got worse in the last 6 months? You can see quite a stark result here, with 16% of dads telling us that their mental health has got much worse in the last 6 months, and an additional 30% of dads from SIMD1 said that it got slightly worse. And for 39% of this group, this SIMD1 group, talked about physical or mental health issues, those personal issues or those of close family. And this is just a quote from one of those dads who says, I'm my partner's at-home carer and my child's primary caregiver. I can't remember the last time I had any time for myself. And possibly one of the most concerning issues that I came across was that dads were less likely to look for or receive support. So what you can see in this graph is this year's study, that's the purple line with the dots on it, compared to the previous 3 years. So the darkest gray is last year's data. So we can see that last year, 62% of dads who were struggling with or saw their mental health deteriorating over that time, 62% of those dads, first of all, went to their partner for support. That's dropped to 51%, which is quite significant actually this year. So a real decrease in the number of dads who are going to their partner for support. And at the other end of this graph, we can see that the number of dads who are looking for or receiving no support at all has risen from 15% last year to 17% this year. So that seems to be increasing year on year. the number of dads who are not seeking support is going up incrementally every year. And this is another quote from a dad: "There's no support for fathers, there's no groups, GPs have no interest, and none of these options apply in real life. The only person I can turn to is my partner, and I can't land all my troubles on her. As a father, you really do stand alone." So for the last bit of this presentation, for me, I'm just going to shine a spotlight on dads who are living separately from their children, some or all of the time. So if you remember back to the start of the presentation, and I talked about the demographic questions that we asked dads to try and understand sort of different family compositions. We took that data and we made sure that it was correct by looking at other quantitative and qualitative analysis throughout the DAD survey, just to make sure that what they said aligned to what they were saying in different parts of the survey. And what we found was that around about 72% of dads live in nuclear families. So that's a couple, either they're married in a registered civil partnership or cohabiting, raising their children together in one family home. So that's a vast majority of the dads who took part. 3% were from single parent families. Now, when I talk about single parent families, this is one parent raising one or more children alone in a family home. 5% were from blended families. So again, that's a couple married, registered civil partnership or cohabiting. They're raising children from a previous relationship, and sometimes with children that they share together in one family home. 12% were sharing parenting, so parents living apart in separate family homes who are sharing caring responsibility for their children. And within this group, 10% of that group care for their children some of the time overnight, and 2% have no overnight care. 4% of the dads who we surveyed had no contact with their children in the month prior to participation, and we had 3% who were kind of an other category. So where there seemed to be a disparity between what dads were saying in different parts of the dad survey, and we couldn't quite be clear which category they were in. We popped them into this other category. If we look at this data again through the lens of SIMD, we can see that family composition changes quite considerably depending on dad's level of deprivation. So dads from the least deprived area are most likely to be part of a nuclear family. We can see 81% of dads are in a nuclear family, whereas if we look at SIMD1 and SIMD2, around 60% of those are in a nuclear family. There was quite a big difference between SIMD1 and SIMD2 actually, which surprised me a little bit. So 10% of the dads in SIMD1 were single parents, and a further 13 were in blended families. So they're the kind of biggest cohorts of that group in SIMD1. So the most deprived areas were either single parents or part of a blended family. And there was still also quite a high proportion of dads who were sharing parenting either 2 to 5 nights per week or 1 to 5 nights per month, you can see. If we look at SIMD2, so the number of dads who are sharing parenting goes up quite considerably in this group. So 15% of that group are sharing parenting between 2 and 5 nights per week. An additional 8% are sharing parenting 1 to 5 nights per month. And you can see actually within SIMD2, this is the highest number of dads who had no contact at all with their children. And if we look at SIMD3, again, that particular group of dads seem to have a large number of dads who had no contact at all with their children. And perhaps unsurprisingly, we can see that these living arrangements has an impact on the amount of time that they can spend playing with and supporting their children's learning. So if we look at nuclear families and single parent families and blended families, where certainly for some of their children, they're able to spend more time with their children. You can see actually quite high numbers of dads who are spending more than 25 hours per week playing with their children or supporting their learning. As dads have to share parenting with their co-parent, that number goes down, as you probably expect. So for dads who are spending 2 to 5 nights per week, the number of dads doing 25 hours or more per week goes down to 6%. And then the dads who are spending 1 to 5 nights per month, as you might expect, there are none of those dads who are spending more than 25 hours. I also have to say that both this chart and the next chart, we didn't ask the dads who had no overnight contact with their children these questions. So that's why we have no data on them. And the dissatisfaction with time spent with their children. So the chart on the right-hand side shows how dissatisfied dads who were spending 1 to 5 nights per month with their children were. So 67% of those dads were almost never satisfied with the amount of time that they spent with their children. And as you can see, single parents and dads who had 2 to 5 nights per week were the next least satisfied groups. Now I'm going to come on to father-child relationships and interparental relationships. So as you can see, once again, dads who are living in nuclear families were most satisfied or told us that their relationship with their child was very good. So 70% of dads who are in nuclear families said that their relationship with their child was very good. And there is, I have to say that there's probably a slight positive bias within this group of dads saying their dads are likely to say, what I'm saying is dads are likely to say that their relationship is very good with their child. And I suppose probably as this chart demonstrates, what's most shocking really is how poor dad's relationship with their children are if they have no contact. So over half of the dads who had no contact with their children said that their relationship with their child is very poor. And then a further 19% said that it was not great. None of them said that it was very good or good. Possibly again, it will be no surprise that interparental relationships, nuclear families, 42% of the dads within that group said that their relationship with their partner or their co-parent is very good. An additional 29% said that it was good. If you compare that to dads who are sharing parenting, that decreases quite considerably. So dads who are sharing parenting 2 to 5 nights a week, only 13% said that their relationship with their partner or co-parent was very good. An additional 19% it was good. Dads with 1 to 5 nights per month, only 9% said that their relationship with their co-parent is very good. And you can see that actually the number of dads who said that their relationship was very poor or not great starts to increase quite dramatically for that group. Dads who had no nights sharing parenting, again, that number, 75%, said that it was very poor. Their interparental relationships were very poor. And when we get to dads who had no contact at all with their child, 94% of them said that their interparental relationship was very poor. And I suppose the question is, well, why does this matter? Well, there was a study back in 2011 that showed, and this was a study of children actually, that showed that regardless of family type, so regardless of what type of family a child lived in, children whose parents had hostile interparental relationships tended to have poorer emotional well-being than children whose parents did not have hostile relationships, as reported by children and their parents, so both groups. So it really matters to children actually to improve relationships between families. Of the 48 dads who reported that their relationship with their co-parent was either not great or very poor, 81% of that group identified significant interrelational hostility as key factors contributing to the strain. So these are just 2 quotes from dads who participated in the study, just talking about the relationship between them and their co-parents. And again, sort of sadly, really, if we look at mental health, so again, this is current mental health looking through the lens of different family groups. We can see that dads who have reasonably sort of continual access to their children in one form or another, so nuclear families and single parent families have slightly better mental health. So there were fewer dads who had very poor mental health or not great mental health, both in nuclear families, single parent families, and blended families. Once dads started to share parenting, their mental health seemed to get worse, to the point where dads who had no contact at all with their children, 24% of them said that their current mental health, was very poor, and an additional 59% said it was not great. Now, again, another issue that's come out in the last year, there was a study that came out earlier on this year, named Suicidality in Men Following Relationship Breakdown, a systematic review and meta-analysis of global data. And that survey showed that divorced men are almost 3 times as likely to die by suicide than married men. And separated men, so newly separated men, are twice as likely as divorced men to die by suicide. So that process of separation and then divorce are particularly sort of create a particular at-risk group. And I think this information from Samaritan's report from 2024 helps explain that a little bit. So men compare themselves against the masculine gold standard. Having a job and providing for a family is central to this, especially for working class men. When men believe that they are not meeting their standard, they feel a sense of shame and defeat. This type of masculinity may propel men towards suicide as a way of regaining control in the face of depression or other mental health problems. So what's causing deterioration of men? So we ask, as I said previously, we asked all the dads whose mental health was getting worse, what was causing it. And then we were able to segment the answers into different groups. And we can see that for dads in nuclear families, work is the biggest issue for them. So 40% of dads talked about work as being a particular cause of mental health deterioration. In blended families, it's money. So 50% of dads told us that money was an issue in those blended families. When dads were sharing parenting overnight, these kind of relationship issues were cited as the biggest issue, 53%. So over half of dads talked about issues. Usually it's with their co-parent, so the mother of their children, often in those cases. And we can see that work is still an issue for that group, but also issues with public services and the benefit system start to creep in. And also some dads talking about a lack of time with their child. But what was really interesting to me is the dads who had no contact with their children at all. And as you can see, 81% of those dads, it's a really astonishing number, just talked about what was causing the deterioration in their mental health was just simply not having time with their children. It was really affecting affecting them more than poor relationship with other people in their family or their co-parents, and more than issues with public services and benefits. And just to give you a kind of sense of what dads are saying, these are dads who have overnight contacts. So dads saying that having to defend my parenting against my ex, having to fight to maintain my time with my children. In contrast to dads who have no overnight contact. One dad saying loss and grief of no contact with my son for 12 months, even though family courts have been involved for over 5 years. So you can see there's a kind of difference between these two groups, quite a stark difference, I would say. And when we look at the sort of support that dads are looking for or have sought or received, we can see that dads from nuclear families really depend on their partners, and also in blended families as well. Dads look to their partners for support in the first instance. Dads in blended families are more likely to seek support from families and friends. But that becomes really significant for dads who are sharing parenting, both overnight and with no overnight stays, and dads who have no contact at all. So friends and families really matter to these particular groups. Dads really who live in blended families, who are sharing parenting or who have no contact with their children, are far more likely to go and see a GP. Or other professionals. And as you can see, this group who are sharing parenting but not overnight or have no contact at all are most likely to talk to other professionals, seek the support from online or helplines and support groups. So it's quite interesting looking at the data through that lens. And I think that's I'm going to stop sharing now and come back to our panel of experts. So let me just have a quick look. So the first question I've got really, and I'm going to ask sorry, my mind's gone blank now. Susie for an answer on this. Sorry, Susie. It's been a long day.
Yeah, you've done well, Kathy, you've done well.
Thank you very much. So what I wanted to ask you particularly, but how can we help more dads seek support for their poor mental health? What can we do actually to help these dads more?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really complex area. So, and I'm just conscious of time and I won't have time to go into things in any sort of depth. I think it's really important to recognise though that when I'm speaking or when we're speaking, we are kind of speaking in generalisation, and that and I think your presentations towards the latter end there started to pull out how this can look different for dads in different situations, but we could also look at dads from minority ethnic backgrounds, dads of disabled children, and we would see quite a different complex picture there. I guess the other thing that we maybe I think there will be evidence, Kathy, you'll be the expert on this, because I imagine for some men becoming a dad would be quite a positive factor for their mental health. It wouldn't always be a negative thing. But it obviously brings different challenges. So I guess the kind of 2 points or 2 kind of areas I wanted to just talk really quickly about was, first of all, prevention is obviously better than cure. I work for Public Health Scotland. I work in suicide prevention. And I guess for me, I'm thinking, you know, what is it that we can do to kind of build those positive building blocks that kind of promote good mental health for dads? I could talk about lots of those, but people will know them all already. But the kind of theme of work has kind of come through this report really strongly. And so actually there's something about what can employers be doing more broadly around creating positive mentally flourishing environments for their staff, because clearly that's a big source of stress. And Public Health Scotland have been doing some work around this through a kind of mentally healthy workplace strand of work, and they've developed an employer mental health network which has been really, really well attended. I think as well, we've spoken about gender role expectations. I think there's something about support for dads as they become dads, and whether we as a wider system recognise the impact of that and provide the kind of support for dads' mental health as they become dads. And I guess that takes me on to the second part of my kind of response, which is, I guess, around support. And I think it is really important to recognise that there's a real diversity of coping out there for men. So not all men will need support in that kind of traditional sense of a service or a group, or and that there are other ways that kind of men or people will kind of cope with some of these challenges through activity, physical activity, all sorts of things. So I guess it's just to kind of make that point. But I think having that kind of range of types of support available for men that actually really do respond and understand the needs of men and offer a kind of really compassionate, understanding response is really key. I think what we know from my work in suicide prevention anyway with men is very often there's an expectation that what's the point? They're not going to be able to do anything. They don't understand what it's like for me. There's no point. I'm not going to waste my time going to these services. I suspect there's a bit of that there. But what we have seen is a massive movement around peer support. Groups like Andy's Man Club, that I could list probably about 10 different groups specifically for men that is about that peer support. And I think that is where the real hope lies. I mean, I think these groups themselves are hopeful places. They're places where men can build connections. We know connection and relationship is so important for everyone, but especially when people become a dad and there's a kind of sense of kind of disconnection from other parts of your life because of this new role that you're having to play. And it also normalizes these struggles. I think it's really important that people can be really understand that this is not just me that's feeling this. This is something that other people feel, and there's real power in that. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I could probably talk all day, but yeah, there's so much more that we could be doing.
We need another DADx on it. I'm just thinking about the time. I think we've run over just ever so slightly. I would quite like to just open this up to other members of the panel, but just to say, if you, for the people who have come along today, if you need to get off, please do. We'll follow up with, we'd really like to hear your responses, your thoughts from today's event. So Connor, I think, has put a little message in the chat, just asking for feedback if that's okay. But if you want to stay on and be part of this discussion, hopefully Susie and Anna and Kevin and Lynn can stay on for an extra few minutes just to carry on this discussion. But if you need to pop off, please do. We're recording the session, so we can share that with everybody, so you can catch up a little bit later if you need to go. But just to kind of interrupt very slightly, and now just I'm just wondering whether well, the rest of the panel actually, if have you got any other thoughts about the findings from the second part of the presentation? Kevin, come to you first.
Thank you. I know I should not come in on the point around the dads in particular seeking support for mental health. The survey shows 83% of dads with no contact report poor mental health. So that connection's unavoidable. At Shared Parent in Scotland, we can speak directly to quite a lot of this. We know that the link between meaningful childcare time and reduced crisis and despair, and from speaking to thousands of parents, we've got over 6,000 on a database, that those feelings of grief and hopelessness is a huge contributor to negative mental health. So you've got statistics there, but I can speak to dads that have sat in front of me and told me that contact with children as a result of our group meetings as well has meant they're feeling less suicidal. And there's those who have told us, they've stated it. I mean, we've got an intuitive CRM, we can run reports, but these are human beings that sit in front of us and tell us this. And Kathy, we've lost men who've told us that. We've had emails come in our info box on small hours. I can't cope. I'm in intolerable pain. I feel as though I'm dead inside. The grief they feel is as though they're bereaved, and that is real. And so I'm glad that we get the opportunity, the catalyst for which is the survey, to talk about this. And so if we want to improve men's mental health. We need to protect and support their relationships with their children, and it needs to be relevant to dads. There's still a lot of services out there that will talk about the default parent, the main parent, the primary parent. It's not helpful. The hierarchical language is demeaning. And so just a couple of examples of stuff that we've got: mental health and family support services, medical practices, schools. They need to explicitly invite dads in. If you've got a community that's been excluded for so long, you can't assume they know where to begin. Or what we see is sometimes dads that will say, oh, well, I can't really expect an overnight, can I? No welfare concerns. Just they're so used to the scraps when it comes to parenting. That's really sad. Mums, dads, and grandparents that come to Fair Parent Scotland, they're already in crisis. So we clearly need more upstream support, particularly for dads in deprived areas who routinely tell us that they feel massively isolated. So we've got helplines are mentioned, peer support groups, community groups. There's lots of possibilities, programmes that would be much easier than a clinical or a legal setting. And then tying it back round to the original comments about reducing stigma and men seeking help, we could all do better about presenting that as not a failure, but we're actually protecting their ability to parent and to be present for their children. And that's where, to echo the points made, where our group meetings prove invaluable. There's so many men with a willingness to be in their life. That'd be a big takeaway in my 7-8 months in the job. It ceases to amaze me. We had a Glasgow group meeting last night. People in bits. There's some of them that are there getting pro bono legal support. They're all different stages of their journey. The peer learning and the support is there for them, but they'll say, no one listens to us. Being here is helpful of itself. We feel less isolated. To get to hear from other people, be inspired by the stages they're at in their journey, share those positive stories. It helps them in the moment, but it also keeps them sticking in for their children, Kathy. So I was a bit jumpy coming in there, but it's as though I could feel it bubbling up because it's emotion, it's raw, it's emotion.
No, absolutely.
It's
And
real.
I think
And sometimes you go to meetings, Kathy, and you see the shutters come down as though you're making it up. And it's really quite galling, but it's backed by the survey findings.
well, I'm glad that it's useful, and hopefully it will be useful for Share Parenting Scotland. Anna, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just one thing to echo really, and Kevin touched on it, is just how palpable the kind of loneliness and isolation comes through in the survey findings. And that's something we've long seen in research with low income men in particular. But just to sort of flip the script slightly, I just want to re-emphasize that we can do things differently. So we can be or have an optimism, I think, and I will ever be an optimist around these debates and discussions. But we talk a lot in our research about father inclusion. So how do we think differently, and in a way that we can adjust and adapt systems and services to better support fathers, to address the loneliness and isolation, to improve mental health and well-being. So we need a language, which is for me father inclusion. But we also need political investment as well. And I think there's a huge amount still to be done in terms of addressing the apathy that's currently sort of at government level. The men's health strategy got released today, so there's potentially a route in for ensuring that this kind of language and this kind of progressive approach is taken up. But you know, the fact that lots of people are in this room today, even or online, and are talking about this, that there's data being generated and presented, you know, I think we just keep banging that drum collectively, then hopefully we can really raise a profile of these issues, and also demonstrate that these things can be changed and done differently. So just wanted to end on a slightly more kind of what can we do next kind of narrative.
No, and I think that's right. I think probably you and I, well, lots of us have been in this arena for quite some time, and certainly the rise of peer support groups for men has been astonishing for me, actually. And I think quite surprising and really good news, I would say, is just being able to have more and more men being able to have discussions about their mental health, I think is really encouraging. And we need more of that, I would say. As Kevin quite rightly, and you quite rightly talked about, I think that the notion of father inclusion and actually a culture of parenting being both parents' responsibility, and that as a society we should expect both parents to be involved as a starting point, I think is probably invaluable actually. We probably have a little way to go for that, but actually as you said, it's a lot of it is about keeping the conversations going, and obviously, you know, I'm thinking about Lynn here as well, having those kind of the joint responsibility of parents means that it allows mothers to go back out into the workplace if that's what they want to do as well. So, you know, I think it's a win-win for everyone. But as you said, there's still a way to go, and we just need to keep on having these conversations. But thank you for staying on. We've run 15 minutes over, Connor. But I think it was a great discussion. I'm really pleased that the panel were able to stay on for a little while longer. I just want to say a huge thank you to them. And if you're still online, please do fill in the feedback form that Connor's put in the chat. We'll follow up today with an email which has got the full report on it in our executive summary. And yes, we'll come back as well with this video once it's been edited, and a little video of our key points as well. So just want to say a massive thank you for everyone for taking time out your day, particularly the expert panel. And if you want to stay on and ask me anything particularly, then please do, and I'll be here for a little while longer. But thank you again. Thank you, everyone.